The day I found a dead fish flopping in my toilet was the moment I knew the HOA had declared war. At first, I thought it was some sick prank or maybe a wildlife mishap. That is, until I turned the kitchen tap and nothing came out but a wheeze and a dusty clank. My cattle troughs were bone dry, my tomatoes sagged like they'd been cursed, and even the dogs were eyeing the bird bath like it was sacred treasure. Confused, I stepped outside in my boots, half-tied and still stiff from sleep, only to spot a crisp envelope taped to my fence post like some passive-aggressive trophy. The paper was watermarked with the HOA seal, printed in overly cheerful font. The message punched me square in the jaw. Water access suspended pending compliance with HOA green space regulations. Thank you for understanding. No warning, no meeting, no explanation, just cut off as if I was some rogue tenant squatting in a community garden instead of the legal owner of 20 acres my family had tilled since 1957. I stormed down to the HOA office like a man on a mission, dust flying off my boots with every step. The place was empty, except for the scent of lemon polish and Sarah Maxwell's smug perfume lingering in the air. Sarah, queen of the HOA and self-declared protector of suburban aesthetics, was lounging behind her desk like she ran the Department of Homeland Security. Her yard had a fountain, a koi pond, and more water than a small hotel pool. When I asked why the HOA had the authority to cut my water, she smiled like a raccoon caught in the hen house and said, "You're still within HOA boundaries, and your yard is unkempt. The bylaws are clear." I stared at her, trying not to laugh or scream, and asked if she'd personally come and measured my shrubbery's compliance with Section 3.4.2 of the Covenant. She didn't flinch, just handed me a brochure titled Landscaping Harmony for a Brighter Tomorrow. By the time I got home, I had a clearer picture of the game she was playing. Sarah had pulled this kind of power trip before. Last year, she tried to fine me for letting my rooster crow before 8 a.m., as if livestock wore watches. Before that, she demanded I take down my antique windmill because it looked aggressive. But this was strategic. Starving a rancher of water wasn't enforcement, it was sabotage. I knew why too. She'd been pushing to buy out the land adjacent to mine for her precious community recreation annex. My land was in her way, and she was counting on discomfort to make me sell. What she didn't count on was me being just petty enough to build my own solution out of solar panels and spite. I called my old friend Curtis, who owed me for that time in 1999 when I pulled his truck out of a ditch at midnight during a blizzard. Curtis was an off-grid guru now, installing solar arrays and rainwater systems for doomsday preppers and eco-ranchers alike. I told him what happened, and he just whistled through his teeth and said, "Well, hell, Tom, sounds like it's time to pull the sun out of the sky and shove it down their pipes." We met that same evening in my barn and sketched out a plan on the back of a feed sack. Solar-powered pump, underground system, private irrigation lines, all legal, all contained within my deeded land, all off the grid. That night, with the help of 2 beers and a headlamp, we started digging. My barn became a covert ops site. Trench lines were carved into the soil under cover of darkness. Pipes tucked away under innocent-looking flower beds. Every time the HOA took a drone photo or sent a complaint letter, I waved and smiled, letting them think they'd won. Meanwhile, I was building a system that would never need their pipes or politics again. Every wire we ran felt like a shot fired in a quiet revolution. 2 days in, Sarah came by with her clipboard and a pair of sunglasses so large they looked government-issued. She glanced around, sniffed the air like she could detect rebellion, and asked if I was finally ready to cooperate. I said, "Sure," and handed her a fake blueprint I'd mocked up in crayon showing her where I planned to put a bird bath and a few regulation height shrubs. She nodded solemnly, clearly satisfied by the drawing I'd labeled for the harmony of nature and neighborhood. Then she slipped back into her golf cart and drove off like she'd just defused a bomb. I didn't tell her that by the following week, my solar pump would be online, pulling clean water from the aquifer straight to my barn, my troughs, and my tomato patch. I didn't mention that I'd checked with the county and found out the HOA's water rights were leased, not owned, and that lease was about to expire. I especially didn't mention that I'd already placed a bid on the lease. Why? Because sometimes silence is the best revenge. Silence and a well-timed valve turn. The next morning, I walked my land with a cup of coffee, passing each of the newly rehydrated troughs and rows of perked-up vegetables. The air was still cool, the kind of crisp that makes you believe things might just work out after all. My solar rig sat like a crown jewel at the back of the property, humming faintly under the rising sun. I raised my mug to it, half in toast, half in disbelief that it had actually worked. No permits denied, no cease and desist, no HOA fingerprints on anything. I had power now, not just the electrical kind, but the kind that comes when someone tries to choke you out and you learn how to breathe deeper. They'd cut off my water to break me. Instead, they gave me a reason to build something better, something they couldn't touch. As I looked out across the field and saw a group of HOA board members gathering near their dried-up community garden, scratching their heads and fanning themselves in the morning heat, I smiled. The game had changed. I didn't need their water, but soon they might need mine. Curtis showed up early the next morning with a trailer full of parts, dust rising behind him like a smoke signal of defiance. We didn't say much at first, just exchanged nods and started unloading solar panels, rolls of piping, and a custom-built pump unit that looked more like a moon lander than a water system. He'd put it together in his workshop over the weekend, and it was designed to pull directly from the underground aquifer beneath my land, fully solar-powered, no outside grid, no connection to the HOA's controlled water line. It was silent, efficient, and exactly the kind of setup that could drive someone like Sarah absolutely insane. We began with the placement of the panels in the back pasture, well beyond the HOA's visible range, but angled just right to catch the full arc of the sun. The trench lines had already been dug during the night runs, so all we had to do was feed the pipes through and connect them to the pump. The system would feed into a buried system that could hold over 10,000 gallons, more than enough to keep the livestock watered and the crops going through the dry season. The beauty of it was that everything we were doing was legal, clean, and on my own land. There was nothing they could do to touch it. I wasn't breaking any rules. I was just rewriting the game. While Curtis worked on wiring the panels, I drove out to the county courthouse to get some paperwork squared away. What I'd learned the week before still rattled around in my mind like a secret too powerful to keep. The HOA didn't own the water rights outright. They leased them through a third-party service broker who'd signed the agreement years ago when the neighborhood was first carved into plots. That lease had an expiration date, and it was coming up in less than 6 weeks. So I paid a visit to the municipal office, met with the broker directly, and politely expressed interest in bidding for the next term. He looked surprised, maybe even amused, but when I explained the situation and showed him the section of the aquifer that ran exclusively beneath my land, he started nodding. It turned out that no one else had even submitted a bid yet. The HOA assumed they had automatic renewal rights, but the fine print didn't support that. I filed my application, signed the paperwork, and left with a receipt that would come to mean a whole lot more in a matter of weeks. By the time I got back to the ranch, Curtis had the first test run of the system going. Water flowed strong and steady into the storage tank, and not a drop had come from any HOA-managed source. That night, I had dinner on the porch, steak on the grill, and a grin I couldn't hide. The air smelled of mesquite and progress. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was fighting uphill. I felt like I was building something lasting. But I knew it wouldn't be long before someone noticed. Sarah always had eyes on everything, whether it was her drones, her board members, or her little army of lawn chair spies who treated my property like it was a crime scene. It was only a matter of time before someone reported back. Sure enough, 3 days later, she came marching down my drive in her oversized sun visor, clipboard in hand, heels stabbing into the gravel like she was mad at the earth itself.